Welcome to Global Voices, the official podcast of the Center for Socially Engaged Theatre at the University of Regina.
Hi, thank you for joining Global Voices. We are here again with an interesting conversation with a scholar that has presented a fantastic paper and has spoken at the department today. My name is Shola John, and I'll be speaking with the head of Department Performing Arts at Adekunle Ajasin University, all the way from Akumba, Ondo State, Nigeria, and he's in the presence of Dr. Abayomi Adegbamigbe. You're very much welcome.
Thank you very much.
And we're glad having you around. So how has it been? This is winter in Canada.
Well, I'm sure you don't want me to begin on that note.
Well,
I'm coping. Let me just, I'm trying to cope.
Great. So you presented a fantastic paper around what we call theatre for development in Nigeria, applied theatre, and how potent it has been. What did you find in your thesis? Looking at the history, this year will make it 40 years we have been practicing theatre for development in Nigeria. What did you discover in your thesis?
Lively. I think it's even slightly over 40 years of practice of a TFD, that is a theatre for development, or applied theatre as you just mentioned it. I think the problem has largely been the application of the relevant theories. I think that's where I try to touch on how far, at least, some of the major models of applied theatre, how far they have been able to implement a major theory too. I think that's just a focus given their, within their practice.
So you did mention the guerrilla theatre model by Wole Soyinka.
Yes.
You mentioned the performance workshop, a studio workshop
yes.
by Chuk Mike.
Yes.
You mentioned the Samaru project.
Yes.
And
the Nigerian Popular Theatre
Alliance. One of the things you mentioned about the model they all have practiced is this fact that they depended on grants, they depended on sponsorship, they depended on some sort of support, funding support, whether from...
But then that precludes Soyinka's guerrilla theatre.
Okay.
Because his own, he was more of a personal vision for stable, positive, positively driven society. So he was the head of the dramatic arts department at that time. So much of the resources that he deployed were from the department, and where extra resources were needed, he would, provide them personally. And of course, it's likely an improvisational theatre, so there's a less emphasis on extensive stage decors, paraphernalia, yes. So it's much limited. And again, considering the fact that his was theatre on the street, so he managed it. He did not depend on any external funding, at least not as much as, he didn't depend. He only relied on himself and maybe maybe support from his friends, personal friends, but not any grant.
So, can we say the reason why there's no sustainability is simply because there is no consistent funding available for projects, or because the goals for those projects have been accomplished, or because in the first place, the model did not necessarily take into cognizance the cultural nuances of the people. What will you say is responsible for the fact that we have practiced something for 40 years and yet we don't have success story out of it?
Well, there are so many factors. There are so many factors responsible for the lack of a sustainability. And of course, you're right, like you rightly hinted, the question of a consistent flow of sponsorship is not just there. Sometimes you find sponsorship, sometimes, or maybe most of the time you don't even get. And it again depends on the cloud of the person who is in charge. If you look at performance studio workshop, by virtue of the personality of Chuck Mike, being an African American, being a very close ally of Shoyinka, who is himself very influential, that's especially after his after he got his Nobel Prize, and you discover that he had access to funding from various NGOs. So, but then even with him, it stopped midway. And for MPTA, I didn't go to the nitty-gritty. Towards the execution of that particular workshop, they ran into trouble. Their expectations were not met immediately.
From the funders or from the people?
From the funders. No,
Okay.
not the people.
Okay.
You see, the people themselves, they are not to provide the funding.
Okay.
No, they are the underdog here. They are the ones that need the help that we're talking about.
Okay.
So funding doesn't, and they made themselves available. When you look at they were the most responsive, talking about the various models that we talked about, and even the ones we didn't talk about. Very responsive.
I noticed something from your work. You had earlier talked about the model, you expanded on what Freire was working on. He said you galvanize the people, you bring them to a level of consciousness where they're able to question their problem and rise, to fight for themselves.
Yes.
That is what he said, and that was what he was doing with his theater at some point.
Freire didn't have a theater.
Oh, sorry, that's what he was doing with his theory. That's
Yes.
what he meant, which Auguste Boyle tried to bring into the theater.
Yes.
Great. Here is the concern I have, or that a lot of people may want to ask. At the point where funders, government agencies like MAMSA was deploying, using theater to kind of mobilize the people,
Propaganda largely.
is it possible for a funder to sensitize, conscientize the oppressed, to stand up to them? The government will be known as the oppressor, or the people in government will be known as the oppressor. Can they necessarily fund applied theater projects that will make people to query them?
The funders. The funders are largely NGOs.
Yes.
You get it? They are representative bodies of the oppressors. So the interest of the NGOs, they have their own agenda, which is to mitigate the effect of the suffering, the oppression, largely. Not necessarily to solve a problem in totality. So, the funders are complicit. They are culpable. They are the provider of what Paulo Freire called false generosity.
So the people who should have stood up against their oppressors have now found the same tool that has been given for their liberation to continue to perpetuate.
Yeah, they use it for their own.
And
they have their own agenda. You get it. So along the line, if their agenda meets that of the particular workshop or community theater project, well, fine. But the question is, for how long will it last?
It has lasted for 40 years. And,
No. The funding has not lasted for 40 years.
No, the practice.
It has been epileptic.
The practice in Nigeria has lasted.
The practice, because there are some other structures upholding the practice.
Like?
Oh, we have the school structure.
School structure.
They are there. Some people, the people I call the middle class practitioners, they earn their living from it.
I would even like to tell you this. As an undergraduate, I was involved in community theater, and then we had to stay in the community for, I think, about 2 weeks, a period of 10
That was
days.
Jos?
University of Jos.
Oh.
And I don't know what is obtainable now, but in some institutions, students themselves are made to contribute money to be able to sustain themselves while the project is going on. So it largely has been reduced to more like an academic exercise. So will we say it's a failed experiment, or it needs some sort of reinvention?
Yes, I agree with you. I wouldn't say it's completely a failed venture, but I think I would say is the venture still trying to find its footing. It has not really come to stay, but certainly it is not dead, because you still have the necessary ingredients, the necessary stakeholders that are still there. And I want to believe that's why we are talking now.
Yeah, sure.
So certainly it's not dead, but again, certainly it's not where it's supposed to be.
So what is the place of your research in trying to reconceptualize, reinvent, and recreate this noble idea of using theater to solve problems in the society, especially in Nigeria?
It's a very complex one, I must let you know, because it doesn't just end at the performance or the show. The performance will come, preceded by the research, but then after that, there's another process we call follow-up. You must follow up, and it's in the course of the follow-up that if there's any need, and usually there will always be need for empowerment, given the peculiar situation of Nigeria. Yes, there's always that need for empowerment programs. After the follow-up, there's also what Professor Steve Abba calls a follow-through. Yes, you must follow through and you don't give up. But the problem has always been, after a very short period of follow-up, for those even who will even do that at all, we give up. Because to even do that, you need all sorts of financial and material resources to be able to accomplish that. Just like you were talking about your own student experience back then. You remember in Samaru, they contribute money. It's not being funded by, apart from having access to the departmental resources,
Support.
but they contribute money to be able to stick it. Otherwise, they won't be able to put up the project. But meanwhile, it cannot be sustained, because after a set finishes its own project, it leaves.
Yeah.
Another set comes. So it's kind of its continuation or its sustainability is being broken down. It's in phases. After every session, it begins all over again, the process. So, there's something that happened while I was covering the 2014 Samaru project. A cameraman was recording the process. I was beside him. During a break, he said that this story all over again. Just repeating themselves. So the stories, even the stories that are being enacted, are being rehashed, maybe modified a bit, but it's more like a rehash of what people keep saying year in, year out.
So there are two questions now in my mind that I'd like to ask. Number one is the question of expectations from the people. When you come into a community, and the community could be anything, could be a community of students, community of people, could be a community of a certain group of could even be prisoners. There is always the expectation of we have some savior from somewhere who have come with some money to deliver us. Okay? Which is often difficult to break through to create a different mindset. I'll give you an example of a project that we did in my own group as undergraduates. Because we were students, they believed in us. So the community used to be a village then, is now a big community now, is after Wildlife Park in Jos, Plateau State. And so their children have to pass through the wildlife to be able to go to school. Secondary school especially. So some of the animals either injure them or attack the children. So now we came in there and then we needed to, kind of start a secondary education or galvanize them towards starting a secondary education. They had a primary school and then they had teachers in those primary schools, government run. So we needed to let them know through drama that you already have something. You have a school, you have teachers who live in the community. So the same primary school can also be used for secondary school without exposing your children. I'm glad that after almost 2 decades, a few years ago, I went there and I saw that they have a secondary school. There's a change. And so, but the community was small and then they have different, ethnic groups.
Within the community?
Yeah. And for the first time, they told us our coming united all the ethnic groups because they all have their heads together. They gave us some money. They contributed money and they gave us. Back then, a lot of money.
Wow.
Because they were so happy that they've never done anything together in unity, but we came, they did it, and then they gathered money and then they gave to us. We were students and all of that, so we were happy. So the expectation, how do you get the people to know where we want you to see a problem?
To be able to have so that we don't critical perception of the problem.
Yes, so I'm talking. You talk about homestead approach.
Yeah.
I'm literally asking the question: how do you infiltrate, quote and unquote, the people so they can be free with you without creating that expectation? That's number one question. I'll ask the second one.
Talking about the homestead approach. One thing you require, I talked about French dialogics, because what took place between you and those, the people in the community back then, was a form of dialogue. You get it? You give them some information, they give you some information back, and then you rub minds together, and then you were able to solve their problem at that point in time. 3 principles, 3 ideals of French dialogics were in place, even without you being conscious that you were actually actualizing French dialogics in the process. One is that you had some affection because you saw the problem, and then you volunteered yourself to use drama to address the problem. So for me, I think it's an act of love. Act of love can only take place where some people are being oppressed. Yeah, this kind of oppression maybe is not the Marxian kind of oppression. You get it? Maybe oppression from the animals that surround them. Of course, you can link it to the insensitive of the government. You can link it. Education. You get it now? Yeah. But there's an immediate oppression by coming from the wild pack. So you were able to show them that you care. That is love. You were able to come down from the university. You left the comfort of the university, which means humility. And then you had hope. If you never had faith in the first instance, you wouldn't have been able to go. In fact, you wouldn't even see the need to go there. It was the faith that propelled you to use theater to solve their problems. So you were operating by the dialogics of Freire, even when maybe you were not even conscious that you were operating a theory, which again speaks to what we had said earlier on. I think you said it. I think Dr. Falabi equally said it, that most of these theories that we ascribe to foreign theorists, that actually they've been in practice with us long before our contact with the Europeans. But maybe we've not been able to articulate such in a way and give it a name. Maybe that's why we always find ourselves falling back on the foreign theories.
All right. So as we're trying to wind down, I'd like to ask, you are teaching students. You are also giving them this methodology as one of the ways to engage with the people, one of the ways to solve certain societal problems they might find themselves. What do you expect from them when they leave you? Do you expect them to consider this as a potent tool? And if you do, what are you doing differently from what is currently up to them?
Well, you see, anytime I was taking my community theater class, and where I would need to make a profuse reference to Auguste Boal and Paulo Freire, I've often been accosted with that, sir, it looks like you're preaching. I said, yes, I'm preaching, because I want you to I'm not just teaching you to pass. No. Because you could, it doesn't take anything. But meanwhile, it doesn't take you anywhere. If you just pass, you may just pass and forget it. But I want to affect your psyche. I want you to have that empathy for whatever you are doing. I want you to see the sense in the fact that whatever happens around you affects you, and that you have a role to play. And that the theater is a potent tool of social change. You need to know it. If you don't know it, it's a potent tool. Look, and I remember citing the instances of some of our big stars. You understand, some politicians cultivated the habit of carrying them along in their campaign. Why do they need to bring them? When you see maybe if it's an Eastern region campaign, you see the politician bring Kanayo,
An actor.
and then everyone, they are not even looking at the campaigner. They are there because Kanayo is there. And if it's here, maybe it's Papi Luwe, Aluwe, or maybe it's Richard Mofeda Mijo you see behind the politician, which means there's something that's attractive. There's that power of suasion, that the image, that the presence, that the clout of popular artists. And where do they get such popularity from? They get it from stage, which means there's an effect that the stage has on the people. There's no, you can't, I'm very, very sure about that. If you have this guy, Kiss Daniel, or Davido, the musician, if any of them enters any campus today, at least in Nigeria, I'm sure, and I know they are popular even outside Nigeria, they will cause commotion. Why?
The power of the art.
So,
yeah, we had an exhibition here, full exhibition of activism, how art has been used. Gabriel behind the camera, that's what he did his master's on, how art has been used as a tool of protest. And,
yes, you can use it for
all over the world.
And the point is, like, I didn't say it at the lecture, no, but I remember it's in my older slide. I remember saying the theater is like a kitchen knife. Kitchen knife in the hands of a housewife is a very useful domestic tool. Kitchen knife in the hands of that same housewife, when faced by aggression of a rapist or an armed robber, is a is a tool, a weapon of protection. The same kitchen knife in the hands of a thug, in the hands of a hoodlum or a rapist, is a weapon of intimidation and fear. The same. So we have the duality of function that it has. The theater can be used for a positive purpose. It can also be used for a negative purpose. I think Judith Ackroyd mentions that in one of his early applied theater essays. So we need to be aware, and the government and some of the some groups that you naturally classify under the oppressor groups, you discover that they have come to realize the potency of the theater. And so they've been using them, and they use money to bait artists. Come and do this thing for me, I want you to. They tell the artist, this is what I want you to do, likely to praise-sing.
So if we take that off the stage and put it on the screen now, we have young artists who, by virtue of their training, still understand what you are saying. One of the popular one is Debo. I can't remember now. Debo is popularly called Mr. Macaroni.
Oh, okay. He's a popular figure.
He's a popular figure on in Nigeria scene who, through his skits, has tried to kind of sensitize young people about rejecting vote buying, and there are a few of them like that. Yeah,
there are quite many that are doing very constructive skits all around, but there are too many people doing rubbish.
Yeah.
Too many people.
Again, it's about the weapon in the hand of the right person and
using it. So I'll say my students, I try to sensitize them to have the right mindset, to use it for positive purpose.
So the modern age, era of virtual reality, artificial intelligence. Okay. At some point, they said television was going to kill theater. Television has come and is going. It has not been able to kill it. Now we have virtual reality, we have artificial intelligence. Do you think that theater is on its way out? Because now everybody is talking about virtual reality. Or it will continue to be relevant as long as human beings?
If there's any one phenomenon in life that is very constant, it is change. So certainly, but then sometimes it doesn't change in the direction that we expect. You get it? Sometimes it comes in form of a modification. Now, it is true that the stage theater is still there, but it's not as it used to be. Now, let me take your mind back to those to the early 70s and up till late 80s, where you had the like of Ogunde, Baba Salada, Professor Laya, Ake Ogungbe, Aisho Pepe, all those traveling theater
icons of the Nigerian.
Yes, those were the days. Even while I was in secondary school, even some theater names that were relatively unknown, they would come to our schools in the primary school, and they would perform. Even if it was inside a very small classroom, they would still perform. And so we had that. Anytime they were coming, they would dance. They would sit on top of a
van.
Truck. No, not van. Okay. Truck. They call it a baggy maggy. It's all wood. And they will wear masks, a Google mask, and then they'll sit on top of a truck, and they're dancing. They'll be beating drums, and then they move around the town so that by evening time, the whole place, the venue is filled up. And when I was in secondary school too, the Aisho Pepe was a regular caller. But then, after a while, it was a TV that kind of killed that tradition. And the likes of Baba Salah, Ogunde, Aisho Pepe, they moved to the TV. And then we started seeing less of live drama. And so it has never been the same, even till now. You must admit that. So it is the universities that you have around that offer courses in theater arts, performing arts, that are still keeping it alive. And that's why you find when you talk about live theater is largely in the ivory tower. You get it? But meanwhile, that's not to say you don't find them. In Lagos, for instance, you find terra culture.
Yes.
They're still engaged.
Here
but
too,
then,
you have the global.
I'm coming. But then, that one, you find it on Victoria Island. Muson Center is also on around Unico side. Glover.
The National Theatre.
Glover Hall. That's around Island.
Yeah.
Somewhere there. Still within the same vicinity. And when you look at the average working class of Nigeria,
They're not in those areas.
No, they work there. But when they finish work at around 5, sometimes 6, and they're dashing back to either Yanapaja, they're going back to Ikorodu or to Ojota. They can't think of any drama
in Lagos.
Yes, taking place in a Muson Center or whatever it is. The next thing they want to think of is a heavy traffic jam that they're going to encounter on the way. Sometimes they don't get home until around 11 p.m. So, there are so many other things that killed the live theater. Of course, it's easier for those who live on the island to quickly cross to Muson Center, to Glover Hall, to Terra Culture, and engage in it. I mean, it's all about the audience. The audience have to be there. Without the audience, there's no theater.
Yeah, that's true. The audience is one of the critical elements of theater, right? There has to be an audience, there has to be an actor, and then there has to be a space.
Yeah.
You know, every other thing can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your time. Quite a lot has been said, and a lot more could still have been said.
Oh, there's a lot to be said.
But understanding the fact that you set out to interrogate this venture, and as a way of closing, I'd like to say that a conference is going to be holding at Benue State University, February 24 to 26. It's a Pan-African conference on applied theater. We're expecting scholars from across, Africa and Europe and all of that to.
I think University of Regina is.
Yes, the center. Yes. Center for Socially Engaged Theater is co-hosting with London School of Speech and Drama. And Benue State University. These are the 3 universities that are coming together to host the conference in Makurdi, Benue State University, February 24 to 26, to look at the past 40 years and to envisage a new future, to see what more can we do, how have we fared, how do we reinvent ourselves and move into the future. There's also another school of thought that believes that the more you have artificial intelligence, the more you will need to connect with people. Though it might be more expensive, but you can't do without human beings. Yeah. And so in the conference, we will be talking about all of these. And of course, I'm sure it will be good to have you in the conference. And if you're watching this podcast before then, it will be good to have you join us virtually or in person. And we will be having a great time with scholars, practitioners. Some of them have retired. And then come look at what we have done so far and what more can we do. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, listener, viewers. Thank you for joining us. Until we come your way next time, this is Glocal Voices. And it's a pleasure having you. Please don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter and also like this and then subscribe to our podcast. Thank you and bye.
You have been listening to Glocal Voices, the official podcast of the Center for Socially Engaged Theatre at the University of Regina. For more details about the center, visit www.cset.ca.